Making video games is an incredibly difficult task. From design and art to the sound and gameplay, every part has to be created to form a full, working piece of entertainment. So I'm highlighting some game devs from across the spectrum of the game industry, from AAA studios to indie darlings, and this week's story begins in a humble place, the imagination of a child. Our developer deep dive for this week begins with the minds behind Doodle World.
My name is Nate Peters. I'm the developer and sole developer of Acutus Games with Doodle World, Doodle World Redrawn, and soon Doodle World 2.
My name is Araceli. What I do on Doodle World is I design some of the characters and, I drew the main character.
To get a more in-depth look at the father-daughter dev team, I set out for San Antonio to check out where the duo practice their craft. Now, before we get into that, let's really quickly go through some of these definitions for words and terms you're maybe not going to be as familiar with. Game development can roughly be split into three very vague categoric levels. Indie games are independently developed from a single studio who is self-owned. AA games isn't referring to a battery type, but instead to games from smaller studios with a moderate budget but have a publisher or parent company. And AAA games, those are going to be your Call of Duties, The Last of Us, Maddens, the big games with massive budgets and hundreds of people working on them. Lastly, there's homebrewing, which is a form of game development where a dev makes a game for a discontinued console like the NES or Game Boy Advance, and this is where we find our story today. In this house, full of gaming relics, retro flair, Nate Peters' game development journey began not with the latest in gaming tech, but by looking to the past.
So my game development journey began in 2019 when I was trying to come up with an idea for an NES game because I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could even produce an NES game using software like NestMaker and Notepad for coding. And I was watching my daughter doodle on some paper one day and she was drawing these characters.
There wasn't really an inspiration at all. I was just having fun drawing.
And I thought that would be a great idea for a game, using her input and her drawings to help design the game. And since then, we came up with a demo and people liked what they saw, and we eventually released a Kickstarter to help fund the game and did a full NES release, cartridge and everything. And since then, we've released the game on the Switch. We've partnered with Limited Run Games to produce another version of the game, and we've released it on Evercade as well. And yeah, all in all, we've probably released about 3 or 4 different versions of the game so far. It's been really exciting.
Now, 9 years old, Araceli has become a full-fledged game artist for her dad, helping create other characters and even learning new skill sets.
I was sitting next to my dad. He was there trying to come up with an idea for a main character or just any type of character. I was right there drawing and he saw my picture. He looked at it for a second and then he just started. Then he went onto a pixel app and he made the character. And since then, I've been really just designing the characters in pixel art.
As soon as I saw what she was drawing, I'm like, that's perfect. You know, this character needs to be in a game.
You may not understand it, but this is peak character design. While working with your family can be complicated, working with someone so creative and full of joy is always fun.
Oh, absolutely. I really do believe this strengthened our bond as a father and daughter. It not only helped introduce me to her art style and her way of thinking about things, but also helped her be introduced to the NES and old platformers and old retro games, which she's grown to love now. See, she was really excited about being involved in helping design a game and putting it out there. And she always reminds me, hey, it's my game as well.
From their home in San Antonio, Peters has had to learn a lot in a short time, being mostly self-taught and mostly self-funded.
So my experience dealing with these platforms and with publishers and with the public in general is I've learned that there's a lot more marketing involved than anything else. I think I've spent more time marketing the game than I did actually producing the game and just trying to get it out there to the general public. Working within the limitations of the NES and pixel art, it definitely is really difficult to work within those constraints while still trying to keep your vision there. And being able to come up with an art style within those limitations can be really difficult. And when we first started development, I didn't know if I'd be able to pull off the notepad and crayon coloring aesthetic that the game has within pixel art, but I think we really pulled it off. With what we've created, and traveling around to different conventions and showcasing the game, I found that we have a lot of children who have never picked up an NES controller before will show up and start playing the game and fall in love with it. That's what really pushed us and led us to a Switch release, because we had so many people visiting us at conventions with their children saying their children love the game, but they don't have an NES at home. And they wanted to know if there was a way they could play it without the NES. And that's what led us to the Switch release, so that everybody could enjoy it on any system.
Now, how does one go from not making games to making games? Well, to keep his creative juices flowing, Nate often just chills out with the kids playing old games. These classic titles also became a huge inspiration for his work on the game, helping him connect the dots of gameplay ideas and design elements.
The most influential games for me are definitely old school platformers. The game is very heavily inspired by the original Super Mario Brothers game and old school, what they call Nintendo hard platformers. So games like Super Mario Brothers, Mega Man, DuckTales, games like that were my inspiration.
And it's these very sources of inspiration that make Nate so passionate about physical media and about game history preservation, even going so far as to say every game should be preserved.
I feel like preservation is the key to developers like myself. Being able to preserve these old consoles and keeping them running is what keeps developers like myself going, because if people don't have an NES at home and aren't actively collecting for it and trying to preserve games for it, then I don't have a market. Game preservation is a very important topic, and I'm a firm believer that every game, regardless of stature, should be preserved, because at the end of the day, every game is a piece of art.
In a year rife with layoffs and a game industry that looks bleak for many who create, it can be hard to press on making your own game. While the mega corporations are busy slashing projects and jobs, indie game developers are hard at work. They're thriving in this market.
As a retro game developer, I don't feel that pressure as much, because I don't feel like I'm in the limelight as much as some of these top developers are, top publishing houses are. I feel like people are more willing to wait for your next project because they understand that this is a single person working on an individual game at a time. And they know that based on previous releases that you're going to release a quality product. And there's been a renaissance in the last couple of years for NES development and what they call homebrew development, with individuals releasing games on the system.
Now with the initial release behind him and a new Kickstarter launched, Nate and his daughter are looking toward the future, dreaming of what their next ambitions are going to be, and maybe not being so sure of what that is right now.
If I could work with any studio, I'd probably say I'd work with Retro Studios up in Austin.
But I don't know if I really am going to do developing, because I like it, but I don't really know if it's what I want to do.
Lastly, I wanted to ask the pair what advice they would give to upcoming game developers or those looking to get into game development.
So the best advice I can give anybody interested in developing a game for any system is, get out there and figure out what your vision is, what kind of game you want to create, and look for the resources. There's so many resources out there available and so many options nowadays that anybody without any experience can create a game.
You might want to get inspired, so look at things around you and then draw what you think looks good and just have fun.
I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Doodle World and its development team. You can find Nate Peters and his game on Nintendo Switch and on their website, listed in the description down below. You can also check out the Kickstarter at the link down below. I'll put a QR code on the screen right here. And be sure to tune in next time for more developer deep dives. Because remember, behind every pixel, behind every sound, behind every character, there's a person. For Hardwired, I'm Andrew Hamilton.